Hello, my name is Michael Mattis, and I am the Director of Theater and Debate at Saline ISD. And today I'm going to talk to you about UIL storytelling and oral reading. So there's some information about me. I do have a number of degrees. I've had a number of positions in teaching where I have had access and worked with UIL. And I've also coached and taught in numerous positions throughout the state. And I have been involved in UIL as a student coach, coordinator, administrator, judge, contest manager, and now as a parent. So I've sort of seen it from all different perspectives. So I do have a little bit of a mistake there, but good storytelling requires students to be superstars, and what it should be is good oral reading requires students to own the story. And I've created some anagrams to help us get through that, the superstar and own the story. So storytelling requires for the students to hear a story and then go and repeat it back. Normally, it's a brief story between 600 and 1,100 words. They only hear it once, and then they retell it in their own words before the judge. There's no time restrictions on the length of the story. So there is no prepared literature for the student. It is the most basic speech event. It's very much about listening and comprehension. It's about memory and creativity. So there is our anagram again. So the first thing we want to think about is just all good storytelling is going to have a clear beginning, middle, and end. So by telling a clear beginning, middle, and end, that's really so much of this event. And then we want to try to create those developed characters. And then there needs to be conflicts that would get resolved through the course of the story, sort of the fundamentals of great storytelling. It's also an event about whether the student can just comprehend a story at the most basic level. So the better a student can grasp the main ideas and summary, the better they will do. Judges do know the story sometimes, and sometimes they don't. So but they do expect some adherence to the story. And I encourage my students to display confidence and seriousness, that all of their movement needs to be motivated, and they need to make eye contact and connect with the judges as much as possible. It's all about your poise. Students that do not seem as if they're in second and third grade tend to do the best because they carry with them a certain poise that makes people want to listen to them. Stories should have a natural progression, so the student should be upbeat and fun to watch. I encourage my students to use their nervous energy in their performance to add that extra energy, not to be nervous, but just to make it entertaining and energetic as they go. And then I encourage them to think about their reactions. How would they react to the events of the story? How would their mom react, or their grandma, or their teacher? And by determining that, it helps them figure out these characters. Because I might react this way while my grandmother might react this way. Well, then show me how grandma would react. And by presenting that, then they're starting to present the characters. So I encourage them to make choices that are interesting as they give their reactions. I do encourage them to use higher volume. They tend to want to mumble as they go through it. So I encourage them to speak louder. And then also nice, clear, crisp words. I record them telling the story to show them how important that is. And we talk about speed and tone and stress, so you can alter the meaning of words and let them play with each of those things to kind of figure out if you say this word in a certain way, then it creates a different meaning. And they seem to enjoy that. Also tell them to think about that characters take time to make decisions and choices. So it's okay for there to be some decision-making time on the part of the characters. Using those pauses and gestures showcase this thought and makes the characters more believable. Of course, it can be overdone, but it does seem to create life with the characters a bit more. And while they're not tied to the story, they should implement the basic elements. Some judges rely on accuracy in a tie situation. So I tell them you can be flexible with the moments, but not the structure. There's a clear beginning, middle, and end. Stick with that. And then the moments is where you can be flexible. And then memory is a muscle. And so it does need to be worked. So practice stories help, or focus on a few just things like memory recall type games. That is beneficial as well. Oral reading, on the other hand, they select a story or a poem, and then they present that as a performance, if you will, and yet they're just kind of standing there, and it isn't a notebook in front of them. And then there is Own the Story anagram. So it is prepared literature, and it does directly correlate to oral interpretation at the high school level with prose and poetry. And it's about finding the right literature for each competitor, and then it is a formal presentation. So I think it's important that we find information that are a story or poems that are on level. I use the emotional age and interest as a guide for the literature. And then I say, could they read this for their classmates? If they'd be too embarrassed to read it for their classmates, then it's probably too low, too below their emotional age and interest. But could they read it for their grandma? If it has things in there that are a little too risque for grandma, then it's probably too high. I give them a practice piece up front just so they can start practicing the skills. And then I encourage them to find the best piece. Worst case scenario, they just use the practice piece that I've given them. But it does give us an opportunity to at least get them started and start building those skills. I have them keep their scripts in a neat little small black notebook, white paper on black cardstock. It makes for easy page turns when it's properly held, and it does look the most professional. They work on those introductions, and that would be before your story starts. An attention-getting device of some type, the quote, a question, a statistic, connect to your audience. Why does it matter to the performer? Why should it matter to the judge? And then obviously the title and the author. I don't let them just read it. They do have to perform it. So I encourage them to find action words and feelings. It's not fully acted out, but they are presenting a story, and I encourage them to tell that story in the most effective manner that they can. We focus on good posture for narration, and then you change your posture for the characters. We keep our feet still. We use one step at most, and we don't turn towards the walls to create these characters. We aim at the corners, either straight out or into the corners, so that they never really go full profile. And then what's the overall message you want to send? And that's your theme. So we want to make sure that theme is fitting for the individual and community standards. And again, judges are going to remember good themes over good stories. So what's the message we're trying to get across? I try not to use the same piece for multiple individuals. I have them cut the piece out, tape it onto cardstock. That way they can mark it up however they want to. I ask them to make choices, and then we think about stage directions. Where's the character moving? And how can we create that type of movement while we're still standing still? And then they do have to look like they're reading. So I try to encourage them to pick up their heads as much as possible. But it is supposed to be oral reading. They're supposed to be reading it at some level. Too much and too little reading is going to be a negative on the ballot. So it's finding that balance between the two. And then I want them to yearn for competition, to have fun, but to know that they're competing for their school and themselves. I don't consider competition a bad word. I think that competition is healthy and allows them to be able to see others and compare the work they've put in compared to the work that other people have put in. But of course, winning and losing should always be secondary to having a positive experience. And that's some information about storytelling and oral reading. And I hope that this information was useful to you. And I look forward to judging you and seeing you as you develop as a speech performer. Thank you for your time.